Welcome back, everybody, to a little new segment where we interview other podcasters around. And this one, we have a really cool guy, Adam Carter from Inside the Mind podcast. But we've checked a bunch of out, and they're really interesting. And you have a cool, unique approach to it, like
I
from
appreciate
different from
that.
everyone. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's definitely like really cool to see and kind of interact. Like obviously we had the couple of weeks ago we had Chump Talk, which is another kind of local podcast, and it's
Yeah.
cool to see, like especially like we started this like at the start of the quarantine just to kind of you know you know keep busy, I guess, and like we
Yeah.
get to meet awesome people like you and athletes as well. But yeah, it's kind of cool like seeing other, like obviously you'd be like kind of a role model because just even on your Instagram, like it's crazy like the production that you do. Like I'm sure you've kind of learned your way along the
It's a
whole
lot
thing.
of it's a lot learning on the way. I learned if I want to learn how to do something, I just YouTube it. So
Yeah.
everyone always asks me I might come off as like this expert or something in Premiere Pro. I'm like, listen, like I'm just as much as a noob as you guys
Oh
are,
man.
trust me.
So, just from a little bit of research we've done, you're a high performance coach.
Correct. Yeah, one of the hats I wear is high performance coach.
Cool.
That's
Um yeah, I was gonna say it's just with this company called Consistently Performance.
Okay.
We're based out of Newmarket, I believe, but more so surrounding the GTA. And now, of course, with the COVID situation, we try and reach internationally. But I really started up with them in November of 2019. So it's been about 7 months now. How that kind of came about was a bit of background is I ended up doing my master's degree at Brock University, and I did it in applied behavior analysis or human behavior.
Okay.
It's kind of like a subdomain of psychology.
Yeah.
And I've always had like this desire to be a sports psychologist, but I never really knew how to like navigate the graduate scene and to get into doing a sports psychology degree. So I went this route because of some connections that I had and some previous job experience. It's actually the degree is primarily used for like a job in working with kids with autism. So my day-to-day job, I work at Hamilton Health Sciences, like McMaster Children's Hospital. I do like behavior therapy with kids with autism, but I've always been a sports nut. So I've always tried to think of a way to combine my education and my passion for sports. And through my studies, because of psychology domain degree, so to say, a lot of theories came up that I recognized just from reading sports psychology articles or journal reviews or stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's really kind of where the passion for the podcast came from, is a way to blend my education and my passion for sports. And I kind of parlayed that into getting a gig with Consistently Performance. So it's been a weird journey so far. One of those journeys where I never would have thought that it would go this way, but here we are.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's interesting because I've obviously like I'm still in high school, but it's cool that you've taken that route because I'm in the same boat. Like I want to kind of still go down that sports kind of medication, like sports med route.
Yeah.
And so right now I'm thinking chiropractor, but like you went to Brock, right? How was the campus there, and like how was your
It
experience
was
there?
so interestingly enough, the first year that I went to Brock, I lived away from home. This is my first year living away from home. So I did my undergrad at McMaster and I'm from Hamilton. So to save money and stuff, didn't make sense to live on campus. So having that whole, off campus experience, me and four buddies from high school ended up in the same kind of situation, all rooming together. So it was pretty cool. And you grow up a lot moving away from home, of course.
Yeah, I bet.
I love the campus. I mean, the school is great. And you guys, if you're all high school age, doing this at such a young age, I think you're ahead of 99% of the other people out there that want to get into the field. So I really commend you guys on that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's awesome.
I think a big part of it too was we kind of found a blessing in disguise, sort of say. Like this whole COVID and isolation madness was, it sucked, but we all kind of wanted to do something. So we figured out
Right.
this, and we're all like Nate and I both play football, and our other guy Matt, he's in hockey, playing
Yeah.
junior B this year. So yeah, we all have a little bit of a sports background, so we thought might as well try something out, and it's working pretty well so far.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's the whole thing of like, you never know what can happen in your life unless you just like take that one leap of faith.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
for me, like I've had the idea of starting a podcast probably since, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk. He's always big
Yeah.
on social media
Yeah.
stuff. I was listening to him probably since January 2018.
Okay.
And that's really wanting to start making a podcast. And I didn't actually put my first episode out until August 2019. So that's like what, like 20 months later.
Yeah.
And it's just the whole kind of the philosophy of you never know what like one episode can lead to you for one opportunity, or one guest recommends you to one person. You just never know what can happen in life unless you take that leap of faith. So that's kind of the mentality I've been approaching these podcasts.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good segue too, because from the start, like, I mean, like you just said, put my 2 cents. I've been listening to podcasts like ever since like grade 8, listening to Joe Rogan, right? Like he was
Right.
kind of like the big one that I listened to, but like I dabbled with different ones, but so like you said, with the starting out, we kind of, you know, put our friends in, or like we did that, but it's kind of cool the chain how it works, because if you interview this guy, then just, oh, you should check out, you know, he mentions that
The networking chain, yeah.
Right.
obviously is a good lesson, right? And
For sure.
yeah,
There's a lot of people skills that you got to kind of have in order to network like that. And that's something that, you know, when I look at the podcast I started August 2019, I really feel like just the personal development that I've gone through has really shown through, like my ability to like those like soft people skills, like conversing with people or networking with people, getting to know people. Those have really kind of, as I look back, have really developed over the past, I guess, 10 or 9 months, whatever it is. So it's just interesting.
yeah. No, I love like listening to podcasts, and like, you know, some people are such like wizards of words, you know, they don't
It's
really talk, right? And you kind of want to copy that, right? So it's definitely cool to be a part of, you know, that kind of like industry, I guess, right? Like just kind of
yeah.
talk to people
And one thing I'll say is when I started a podcast, I didn't realize how hard it would be to like have like a conversation with somebody else and keep that going and going. And I even tried, I think my second episode I put out was like a solo episode, just me talking. It was right when Andrew Luck retired from the NFL. So I was like, this is like somewhat mental game of football. So I'll talk about this, and me rambling on for 15 minutes was like one of the most difficult things I did in my life. It's so underappreciated, I think, how hard it is to be a podcaster.
for sure.
And it's definitely like I like it's huge respects for you as well for kind of doing it solo, because it's even we find, well, there's 3 of us doing it, and we find it difficult doing it that way as well. And I guess there's different challenges too. Like I think a lot of the time we work really well together, but we run into the problem of knowing when to speak, I guess. Like
Yeah.
it's not that bad because we're able to just cut it out in the final copy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like a lot of the time we'll recognize that we're all running into each other and trying to find when we can all put our 2 cents in. So yeah, you nailed it perfectly, saying it's a little bit underappreciated. Oh, I don't know if underappreciated, but it's difficult
Yeah.
more than people would think it is. You know what I mean?
And I think it's more difficult doing it online, like over Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it's a bit easier to kind of like get a gauge of the conversation and when to step in and stuff when you're all in person in the same room. But because of the situation we're all in, we're all doing our podcast over Zoom, at least up in your Canada, given all the restrictions and whatnot. But it's tough. You got to kind of take that couple second pause after everybody speaks just to make sure that like the room's clear or whatever, and you can say your 2 cents.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, let's kind of talk a little bit of your podcast. I know you touched on it definitely, but and we got to know a little bit of what your inspirations were. But what is your podcast about?
Yeah, so I really try and, I guess, dive into the mental side of the game. So everything mental. So I really approach it like, I'll backtrack a minute. When I work with a younger athlete or a youth athlete or whatever it is, we have a certain like assessment we put them through, and we ask them about different topics like, you know, what's your confidence level when you play? How do you deal with pressure? Do you compare yourself to others? So on and so forth. All like the mental side of the game stuff, right? And I try and like extract that assessment and ask those same questions to pro athletes. So if I have a pro athlete on, I'll be like, how did you deal with the pressure of playing in the Grey Cup? Or, you know, when I had Marty Biron on recently, I'm like, how do you deal with the pressure of coming in after Dominic Hasek, who's like one of the most, you know, influential goalies of his time? And those are some pretty big pads to fill. So I really try and get into the nitty gritty of the mental side of the game, kind of what's going on behind the scenes, or like, no pun intended, but like what's going on inside the mind of the athlete.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, that's awesome and cool, because you just uploaded the one with the Ticats player, and we just did Jared Davis last week. He's the defensive end for the Ticats, and
Saw that, yeah.
It's crazy because like, especially for us, like we never thought, like we're obviously huge football fans, like we would never thought we'd be talking to Garrett Davis right on the podcast.
Right.
So it's pretty surreal.
And that's one thing that I talk to a lot of athletes about, like, what's it like getting your first NHL call up? Like, I had a guy on the podcast recently, Joe Gambardella. He's in the Bakersfield Condors, but he's had his first NHL call up this year with the Edmonton Oilers. So it's like, what is it like? You're looking around the dressing room and you're beside like Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, so on and so forth, right? And it's kind of, I feel like a lot of things that go on in sports happen, like they translate to personal life as well. So him going through that experience of like being beside McDavid and Draisaitl, he has to kind of keep his cool and still be who he is. And I think it's the same for us as podcasters, that there's these guys that we see on TV and we idolize or something, but we're here for a reason. It's almost like we belong in this conversation. So it's about not getting too caught up in the moment and just trying to be yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's another thing. It's like it's weird because we had Nick Spalling, and it's like, so tell me how playing with Crosby was, or something like that. At the end of the day, like they're just normal people that live their day-to-day life, and it's I guess kind of segues to another question. Like, do you just like DM them, or like how do you kind of get in touch with them?
Yeah, so when I first started off with just friends and family. And then after that, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, actually DMing a lot of people. There's a lot of athletes on LinkedIn, as well as a lot of different sports psychologists or mental performance coaches. And then another buddy of mine that actually has his own podcast, similar kind of theme to mine. He recommended like go to Instagram and start DMing athletes on Instagram. So that's what I did. So I literally DM athletes every day to try and come on. It's all about what Gary Vaynerchuk always says, is you have to provide more value than what they can give you. So I try and always frame my requests to potential guests as I'm trying to provide them with value for coming on.
Yeah.
And you got to get kind of used to hearing the no's, because not every athlete's going to say yes. Of course, you're going to get 90% no's, but it's part of the kind of personal development growth that a podcaster goes through, growing their podcast.
Yeah, we totally agree with that too. We're doing the same thing with the DMing, and it kind of gets tricky too, because like you said, you do experience those no's along the way, but it helps build
It's another thing of like, I always talk about this on my podcast with athletes, is the blend between sports and personal life. And just as an athlete has to get used to hearing no, or being cut, or being told by a coach they're not good at something, just like how everybody else in whatever job they're in, and specifically in our context, going out and reaching for guests, we're getting told no as well. So It's just interesting how sports and personal life, how they interact so much. And I always try and really highlight that when I speak to the different athletes.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, like obviously trying to get to the top tier athletes, because I mean, in your case with your podcast, you kind of like go into the mindset of that. And that's obviously a way different caliber than, say like a junior C hockey player locally, which is still obviously a huge deal, like a high school kid or whatever. But it's cool to see like the psychological thing, and even talking to like just as life experience too. Like we had Scott Walker on, and like he really wanted to take the talk that we had with him into like our life and like learning experience and stuff like that, which I really like. That's priceless, right? I love doing that. So yeah.
Even like another quick question too is, I think just what Nate touched on there, but it's fun to do the podcast, but it's also, I think, really cool to learn. Like we learn a lot doing it, having those conversations with so many different people. Everyone has a story, and there's always lessons to take out from every story. So I guess a question for you is, what are some of the cool things that you've learned so far? I'm sure there's tons, but like even just top 3 or 2 of like lessons you've learned from the people you've talked to.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The first thing that pops to mind is it was really surprising to me, not surprising, but it was really interesting to me, I guess, how many athletes said like how much their friends and family played a role in their development. And I think it really goes on to show that nobody can really get to where they are in life on their own. You always kind of need that support system around you. And so many athletes I talk to, they talk about how their mom or their dad were role models for them, or they had buddies that were there for them and kind of consoled them when something went wrong. That was like a really interesting thing that I kind of gathered from a lot of the interviews, is almost 99% of talk about their friends and family playing a major role in their career.
Yeah.
So that was just really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Another kind of concept in sports psychology that I try to take into podcasting is when sports psychology, we talk a lot about athletes judging themselves. So you think of a hockey player, they have 3 or 4 really good games in a row and they're on that high, right? And then once they have like a slump, they're on that low, and they're very much like an emotional roller coaster. What we want the ideal athlete to have is more of like an even keel mindset, where no matter if they have a really good game or a really bad game, their kind of mindset is still pretty level. Like they still are aware of who they are, and their judgment on themselves doesn't change. And I try and take that same approach to podcasting. No matter if I have, my idol growing up, which was probably Matt Sundin, if I had him on the podcast, or, if I had a podcast episode that did absolutely terribly, try and keep my mindset of like, I know who I am. I'm a podcaster, quote unquote. This is getting very philosophical, but I hope you're getting the point there. That I try not to get so much of as an emotional roller coaster on the highs and lows of podcasting. I really just try and approach it day by day.
Yeah, no, I love that kind of stuff. And it's kind of a cool route to kind of hear the behind the scenes and kind of break down kind of what their career's been. But kind of just, sorry, you go, Keith?
Yeah, just saying, just to top on what you just said, it's a good lesson for us to know too, and to take away from this, because we've definitely had our fair share of podcasts that just haven't gone the way we've wanted to. So yeah, just having that idea of what you said of kind of being level the whole time, it's a good thing to take away. Yeah,
and it's not easy to do. I always speak with athletes, or I'll talk about sports psychology concepts, and people think it's like an overnight fix, and these are things that pro athletes work on for years and years, and then they can finally master it, right? So it's all about doing the little things day by day to get to that outcome that you're looking for.
For sure. Now I'm just kind of on your scrolling through your Instagram, and I see you're a huge tennis player. Have you?
Yeah, tennis. I actually started playing it probably last year seriously.
Okay.
I played sports my whole life, but kind of once I got out of high school, team sports are hard to come by just because your buddies are all moving away and whatnot. If you're not like going pro, it's hard to find teams to play on. Yeah. So I really made the transition to solo sports. I started off in powerlifting for a couple years, and I did boxing for a couple years, and now most recently tennis. So that's kind of my flavor of the month. But it's been challenging, and the mental aspects of that have been super challenging as well, and have been a really good learning experience.
Yeah, no, I love tennis. Me and my brother played it, and awesome. Like what you said, it's kind of like, it's cool to see the difference from like a team to a solo sport. Like even with golf, I mean, I'm not the best golfer, but it's all mental, right? Like it's
100%.
Even with tennis, right? Each swing, each stroke is like it's the muscle memory, but it's also your mentality going into it, right?
Yeah, there's a famous quote by Venus Williams, and she said that sports are mostly mental. You either win or lose the match before you get out there.
Yeah.
And I always say that to a ton of athletes, and they're all in agreement with it. And especially in those solo sports, because there's no one else to really rely on. It's all on you. And if you're not in the right mindset before you go out on the course or go out into the court or whatever it is, you're done. Like it's not even worth it, pretty much.
Yeah, we just filmed we're trying a new series called the Charged Up Open, where we're interviewing guests and while playing golf with them.
Awesome.
So it was a really cool thing, but
yeah, got a little bit of Spill and Chicklets vibe with that.
Yeah.
They did a couple episodes.
That's kind of like the inspiration for it, but nice. Just with that mental game, Nate. You can see in the video that Nate doesn't do that well at the beginning, but it also it goes like full with like the mental aspect. Like your first shot might not be good, but like it takes a toll on you for the rest of the game.
100%.
Sorry, Nate, for exposing you.
But yeah, a couple questions. Like, what do you see like coming up in your show? Like, are you gonna kind of stick to your athletes and mental game, and what's next for you?
Yeah, it's at the moment it's really sticking with the mental game. I would say when I started my podcast, it was like solely like 100% on the mental game, but I felt like it was getting a bit too technical for like a mainstream audience. So I've tried to like add in little segments in the podcast that are more like marketable. So I do like a little rapid fire question thing at the end where I ask them like, what's your favorite snack? Like, who's your idol growing up? Just kind of little questions like that. I'm trying to slowly, like, podcast episode by podcast episode, make it more personable or relatable to more people rather than just solely focusing on the mental game. But I'll say that for the time being, the mental game will probably be the main focus for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
That definitely, I really like that about your podcast as well, because that's what kind of makes it more unique too, right? Like what we're doing, um we're just, I guess, trying to do it better than a lot of people, but in just like the interviewing aspect. But with your, like in your case, you're not just interviewing people, you're going into the mindset, which a lot of people like to hear that too, because it's a fascinating subject.
Yeah, yeah. I would argue too, though, that like even you guys with your podcast, especially because you have three of you guys as co-hosts, that's already a unique podcast in and of itself, because there's never going to be a podcast that's like exactly the replication that of the point of view that you three guys have. So I always have people kind of hit me up about podcast advice and stuff like that. And I always tell them, like, you yourself are unique as a podcast host, and that's what separates you from all the other podcasts, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
for
No, that's,
sure.
yeah, that's very, very fair.
So I guess kind of just, I mean, it's been great talking to you. I never really, I've like didn't really expect this to like, go like that long, but it's been great talking
How
to you.
long's
It's
it
been
been? Has
awesome.
it been? Oh, it's been almost half an hour, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It goes
Wow.
quick.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Exactly. But yeah, we really appreciate you coming on, and I think as podcasters, like, it's a pretty competitive industry right now. So kind of doing the favor for favor, helping each other out and
Yeah.
learning from each other is, I think, a really good thing too. So yeah, we really appreciate you coming on and learning about what your podcast is about.
No, yeah, I appreciate you boys having me on. And like you said, the podcast space seems competitive, but there's how many billions of people in the world? Like, I think there's room for all these podcasts to grow and collaborate together. So I'm always reaching out to podcasts and collaborating with them and stuff, and just bouncing ideas off each other, right? Because we're all kind of in the same niche of sports. So a listener might like all of our podcast type of thing, right? So if one person helps one person out, we're helping everybody out. So I really appreciate you boys having me on, and it was a great talk.